Hey everybody, and welcome back. Right, well, we are really close with this. I got the extra bit of HT lead, the ignition wire, and I got the little crimpy things for the end. As you can see, I popped the carburetors on. I'm going to mention that in a minute. And we know we've got the oil lines on, got all the wiring on now. So basically, time the engine. Oh, I've ordered some bell mouths for this, the velocity stacks to screw on there just to look the part, because that's what they had on. So we have to do the ignition timing and then put some oil in. I've got a battery. I'm not going to make the battery carrier. Judd, as I've mentioned, is a first-rate machinist person, well, first-rate fabricator, beautiful work. So he said just give him the dimensions and he'd make one. But it struck me that, I've got a biggish battery there that I'm just going to stand here and connect up so we can get power for the ignition. But for, again, the purpose of this bike, probably one of those small solid state ones will do. So whether he just wants to make a little battery carrier and get one of those, I don't know. So I'll just leave that for him. But I'll say, other than that, once we've got the engine time, we put some oil in, put the tank on, or just use a dummy tank at the side just to check things out, connect it up, and away we go. If it runs, we put the fairing back on and we're all done. So, anything else to say? Oh, I actually had a comment that I hadn't worn my cap recently, and that's true, because every now and again I forget to put it on, and the workshop's a fair way away from the house. So I get down here and realise I don't fancy walking all the way back up just to get my hat. Right, so lots more comments coming in, lots of opinions, which, we won't labour, but I'll just say again, for what we want for this bike, I think the plan of what we're doing is right. One interesting comment I've got was, I suppose you could say, apropos of me mentioning the XI battery thing, chap said, why don't I, put points and everything on like this, why don't I make up a dummy ignition? Because as you saw, all it was like an alloy extension with 3 wires coming out. I could do that and just sort of run the wires up behind the fairing to a dead end, but that maybe seems like a lot of work for what it would do, because you're not going to see that the fairing comes right along the sides here, quite close in. Okay, so let's just talk about the carburetors for a minute, and then the reason the bike's down is so I can get into the hump and do the last little bit, put those little crimpy things on the ignition wires, sort of pull the wires so I know exactly which one is which, and then I'll put some little labels on them. I wish I had some different coloured tape or something so I could put a bit of red, bit of yellow, a bit of black on, but I haven't. So we'll just stick a little bit of masking tape on where it's going to be out of the way and write on that. Okay, so let's just cover a couple of points about the carburetors. Right, I just want to talk about the carbs for a minute. You may remember that originally these were mounted on a big gantry with a single cable pull. And the gantry, on the back of the gantry, it has stubs, and there were stubs mounted on the cylinder head and then a rubber connector between the two. But that, I think, would have pushed these out so far that I'm pretty sure that gantry wouldn't have gone on. Now, in a lot of the photographs I've seen, in fact all of them, the carbs are rubber mounted. They are mounted. But some of them are mounted on stubs directly to the head. One photograph looked as if they'd almost just taken the gantry and cut all the extra bits off in order to have the piece with the various mountings on for the carbs. But I've sort of looked at this from a logic point of view. Remember when the bike came, it had this plate on with just some tape masking the holes. So if these carbs were rubber mounted in any way, where have all the stubs gone? Because, as you saw, I have a little cardboard box. It says on it, actually it says T150, I think, standard. and it had all the various bits and pieces in. I found all the little bits that were missing were in that box. So this plate was bolted on, and as I say, the holes for the studs are 2-inch, which is Amel size. Japanese are 1 7/8. I don't think I've seen a Bing or a Del Auto type carb that wasn't stub mounted. No, maybe 1 or 2, but it would be metric, whatever. So I don't see why it would end up at being 2 inches. So to me, the logical thing is that these carbs were bolted directly to this. That's the way it was made. It was made to do that. They fit on with a little insulator. Maybe they had longer insulators and longer studs. I don't know, but I mean, they clear everything, so they go on like that. And then there's enough space to put the velocity stacks on. So as I said, I just couldn't see why that would be bolted on there and then have the stub things bolted on and we not have the stubs. Or this have stubs on the back of it, so the carb bolted directly to this plate, and that was then rubber mounted to the head. I think it's too much to believe that when all the other bits didn't disappear from the engine, those bits did. So that's the way we're going to do it. Now, one thing I will say is I had a comment from someone that had a Trident or Rocket 3, and I think he'd done away with the gantry thing and gone like this to just 3 cables. And he pointed out that to do it, he bought from Amel these weaker springs that they make. And I thought, oh, fair enough, that's nice to know, but you know, because we're not going to be using this thing, it probably isn't a problem. But I tell you what, pulling 3 carb slides against the standard springs is, well, using the cable, it's almost impossible. I don't know what it would be like with a twist grip on, we'll have to see. So the last thing I'll mention on this, actually I think I have to swing the camera around a bit. Let's go up here. Is, as you remember, this triple thing and everything was for the chokes. But choke and carb cables are basically the same. So it all fitted nicely. And do you know what? If that cable at the other part was 3 or 4 inches longer even, it would have gone straight onto the twist grip. I don't know. Actually, because it's such a limited lock on this, it may even work. So I'm going to pull out the twist grip, put it on, and see what's what. But when I pulled it out and put it on, I thought, oh God, look at that. It is so close. This is like 14 inches, so 18 inches. And I haven't seen a cable under 20 odd inches long, so the chances are I'll have to make a throttle cable just to reach there if need be. So, okay, let's finish. I tell you what, let me pull a twist grip out because I've got a bunch, and we'll see what happens. So how annoying is this, look? Loose, 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 loose. It's just, God, that is so annoying. Actually, you know, again, for our purposes, an inch more would have been enough. And you hear them? It is a strong pull. So we'll probably order some of the lighter springs and just put them in later on when they arrive. Actually, I'll show you something else that's slightly problematic. And that's the front brake cable. And I'll tell you what, I'm pretty sure this right hand clip on is bent. So this bike maybe was dropped. But again, it's just a slightly tightish turn. I did have it round here, but the cable's not long enough for that to work, but that seems to work all right. All right, so let's have a look at these wires. Right, now here's our HT lead. And you see, it's got metal core. When you're buying HT leads nowadays, be careful you ask for the metal core, because a lot of them have a carbon core, and of course you can't screw plug caps and things into that. So what you'll often find is, you can see I've bent the wire over a little bit. You cut the insulation part back a bit. Well, sometimes you'll find people have a whole load out. All they do is just fold it back over here, push it in the coil. But what you do is you get one of these. You see it's got like a little, it's all pressed out. They're all just pressed out of these. So there's a little pointy bit in the middle. I'll have to check the video and make sure you can see all this. There's a little pointy bit in the middle, little pointy bit at each side. So what you do is you press your little pointy bit in the middle so that it goes in to make a connection with the wire. And then you crimp them up. Oops. And then that is going to make a nice tight fit into the coil. Okay. After you've done this, what you want to do is just get the other end of it and check the continuity to make sure you've made a good connection here. Right, because it's easy to miss the wire and not get it right, and then you can't understand what's going wrong, but all it is, you haven't actually made a connection at this end. So let me do the other three. Then what we're going to do, you see, is I'll reach down under here and I'll pull the wire and I'll say, okay, I know what that one is. I'll mark it through there and then push it into the appropriate coil. So let me get all that done. I thought, what the hell, I'll show you this. So, where are we? Right. We put one into there. Generally you do it with the plug cap on, but I haven't got the plug caps on yet. And you push one lead up into the plug cap. Let the traffic go by. See, so that outer part is connected to the wire core. Alright, okay, let me do the rest of them. Alright, you're going to love this. I'm just sorting out 3 decent plugs just to check that we get a spark on this ignition. And I look in here and I'm pulling plugs out. Guess what I pull out? The Kawasaki KT250 brake cam that disappeared. I must have had it laid next to a couple of plugs, just picked them up, thrown them in the box. Bugger! Oh well, let's press on. Now just before we do the ignition timing, I've connected all the wires up because I wanted to make sure that everything worked. So all I'm going to do is connect across each set of points. So there's one. See, I'll plug there. One set, here's another set. Up there. And here's the third set. Right there. Alright, so we know everything is connected up. So now let's get this timed and go from there. So, problems. Alright, let's get ready to do the ignition timing yet again. And the way to do it is to, from the instructions, you want to do it on this cylinder, which is number 1 in the firing order and is the black and white wire. So it's this bottom set of points here. You take it to top dead center on number 1 cylinder with both valves closed. And then round the front of the engine here, there's a plug you take out, and there are 3 sort of holes in the flywheel, 1 for each cylinder, and then you wind the engine back, and when you get to 38 degrees before top dead center, the hole will line up, and there's a little plunger instrument you can get. I have one for, hang on a second, because I won't be able to find, yes I can. This is for the twins. So with the twins it screws in the back, and then that little plunger, when the hole comes round, drops into the hole in the flywheel and locks it in the fully advanced position. So I don't think, no, it's a different size thread, so it won't go in the front on that one. Alright, so that's what you do. Well, I didn't want to use the kickstart because turning this engine over by hand is difficult. Well, not difficult, requires a lot of energy, shall we say. So I would have had to take it up to top dead center to make sure I was on the compression stroke, and then I would have had to turn the engine round twice more to get it back there, or coming up towards there, to get the pin in, because of course you can't turn the engine backwards with a kickstart. So I wanted to put the chain on so I could use the back wheel. Well, it was in gear, I couldn't get it out of gear, so I took the outer cover off and just worked the quadrant with a screwdriver, got it into neutral so I could put the chain on, put the cover back on, and with the linkage on it just wouldn't change gear. So I took the cover back off again, and of course this time it broke the gasket, so I've got to get a new gasket, but everything seemed to be fine. I could change it through the gears just by levering the quadrant. So I put it back together, put the gear linkage on, and it just wouldn't do it. This actually would flex a little bit. So I'm imagining, or I'm thinking, that with the gear shaft spinning and oil in there and everything, like when you're riding it, it will change gear a lot more easily. So I put this pair of mole grips on, vice grips, and it will go through all 4 gears. And notice I say 4 gears, John, it doesn't have the 5-speed box in it. Alright, so John Blanc mentioned that you might have had a Rod Quaife, there's a name from the past for those of you my age in the UK, a Rod Quaife 5-speed gearbox in there, but it doesn't. It's got the standard 4-speed gearbox, so this is starting to look less and less like some more expensive type factory racer. Alright, the only thing I'll mention is that if you're going to use vice grips on here, as with nuts and bolts, don't force it, because you could strip or damage anyway the splines. So this is, fortunately the splines are well out on this. There's a bit of ordinary unsplined shaft. So you just, if you can't do that with it, then don't force it, because if it slips it'll damage the splines. Alright, so I've taken it up to top dead center on compression stroke. So now what I can do is use the back wheel to turn this backwards and get us to 38 degrees. Then we can do the timing. So let me turn the engine back, because I'm going to be in front of you trying to get this right. Right, well, I'm sure this is going to generate comments, but I've read and reread the instructions in the workshop manual, and I don't know if it's because I'm getting old, but I couldn't make head and tail of them. There seemed to be something missing, because they talk about, as they always do, clamping the advanced retard part into the fully advanced position, right, by putting a large washer on that, instead of bearing on the center, bears on this, and you tighten it down with the center bolt. But if you do that, you're locking the cam into the taper, and there's no locating pin. Why not? On the Triumphs there is, but BSA never did. Now that's not a big problem when you can move the plate, because you can get it close to and then move the plate and sort of going. But here of course the plate's screwed up tight. Now you can move the 3 individual plates, so maybe that's how you do it. But anyway, what I've settled on doing is this. The center thing for the extractor is 5/16 fine, so I've just put a 5/16 fine in so that I could, and I've joggled this a couple of times on and off, moving it round, it's tapped on the taper, okay? So I've got this test light connected to the battery so that when we've got an earth, it lights up. So now it lights up. When the point's open, it should go out. So basically I've got it set now. As I say, I've tried this a couple of times on and off, so that look through the hole in here. I'm at fully advanced. I'm at 38 degrees. So there the points are closed. I'm going to move the cam as if the auto advance was working. Right. So the points are just opening at 38 degrees. So full advance, they're just opening. So that means it should be right. Okay. So that's that for there. I'll work my way around and do the other three, because now I can turn the engine. And what I'm going to do is take this out and we'll lock it down with that. And I'm presuming, having just the way you normally do with the twins, having set that one, because with the twin what you would do is you would set the first set of points by moving the plate, and then you would set the second set of points, the vine adjustment, by moving this secondary plate. So I've got that one set, black and white, which is time inside. We're all set to go. So now I can just work my way around and just see if I need to adjust the others anyway. All right. So as IC Weld would say, that's just my way to do it, not the way to do it. Okay, so let's press on. Right, we've got to move around and do a little job on the transmission side. I had a viewer, you remember when I was putting all this together, I had that there. I had a viewer who mentioned that that goes on the inside of the, this is the clutch shock absorber. Don't forget the clutch is actually inboard, it's inside another case in there. This has got the oil in, the clutch is inside a dry case. So I looked in the parts book and sure enough he was absolutely right. And that's why I keep harping on about it. I like to have a parts book, because although a manual will tell you all sorts of things, there's nothing better than to look at an exploded diagram and say, oh, look at that, you know, there's this, that and the other, I'm missing a bit, or yes, this is the bit that goes there. And actually, speaking of parts books, I had a few comments about the oil filter. Well, first of all, you know, I have my faults, but I wouldn't put an old oil filter back in. You know, I'm not that tight. And secondly, it was mentioned there's a spring goes in there. I know there's a spring goes in there because I looked in the parts book. When I was getting the part number for the filter, I saw there was a spring there, looked in the little cardboard box, and there it was. So what we've got to do is take this off to get to the back. And I actually did some measurements using this, because it's a machine face. I measured how far out from this that bearing was, and I measured how far in from the outer covers face it was, and it was exactly the width of this. So with that on, it's exactly right, and actually it does sort of fit in there. But equally, with that behind this, pushing this outwards, it would still be right. So that doesn't go there. So let's set to and take this off, which means of course we've got to take this off because it's an endless chain. Marking that. Well, I was almost stumped again then, because this thing doesn't come out. It's just got like a mushroom end on the inside. And I didn't have a deep well 15/16. And that just, it was catching there. And then I found one that was fractionally longer, and I was just able to get this nut off. And luckily, from the feel of it, we don't need to use any extractors or pullers to get this off. And voila, that's got the, that goes on there. Now all we've got to do is put that in there, get 2 sets of splines lined up. There's 1 set. I've just been out the door to look at... Oh, hang on a second. Right, that was George, my neighbour, walking in, and I'd literally, just a couple of minutes before, looked out the door to see if he was there, because I knew he'd have a 15/16 deep well, and then he walked in. Come on now. So actually he's gone back over to get one, so it'll be easy for me to put this back on. I haven't got that one on there. Come on. See the bloody splines, they're lining up. They're not going on. Why won't this go on there? You turn you off while I fiddle. Right, that was annoying, but it's gone on now. Okay, and then if you're wondering what fell out, it was this. Okay. Then we have that lock washer to go on there, and that nut. That was a bit boring letting you watch that, wasn't it? So anyway, let me put that one back on there and fasten these up. Right, they're both on, and I borrowed a deep well from George so I can get them tightened up, and then I'll just put the outer cover on, and we'll put the outer cover on. Then we've got to put the clutch mechanism on, and I see in the manual that it sort of tells you to sort of screw it up, and then you put a feeler gauge in the back, so we'll do that next. So I'll put the cover on. Here is the, yeah, you can just see it. That is supposedly the correct clutch cable. It is the right length, it has the right fitting on. But my God, it's a heavy duty cable. Anyway, this is all set up. You do this until you can get a 5 thou feeler gauge in there. Funnily enough, the manual mentions it having a lock nut there, which would seem to me to be sensible. But the parts book doesn't show a lock nut, or I can't find one. So anyway, it's 5/16 fine. So I've put a lock nut on and put the cable on, and I'll tell you what, it's a really heavy pull. But that's it. So that's that on there. So the last thing to put on here is this outer cover. Now I'm missing a piece from just in here. It's the plug that blanks off the adjuster for the chain tensioner. The adjuster for the chain tensioner is just for a slotted screwdriver, and that turns that shaft and pulls the chain tensioner up, same as I've shown you on other ones. So I'm going to have to order one of them because it isn't in the little box. I'll have to have a look and see what there is. Okay, so let's think what else we can do. Right, well, I decided to make a head steady for this. As I say, from the photographs I've seen, some of them seem to have one, some of them don't. And of course the road bike had one. So working on that principle, I decided that if it didn't need one, having one wouldn't be a problem. But if it did need one, not having one could be. So we're going to mount it up to this bracket. Now, because of the way the tank is flat and everything, the tank comes down right to here. It was going to be difficult. I couldn't just go across like that, it wouldn't work. It had to be something absolutely central. So what I've done is I've made this piece, which is going to bridge across the two mountings for this. And then into that will go this, right? Because the other thing is, I've got to make this so that, you know, let's say the road bike one is two separate pieces. So they just come and go that way. They come off the bracket and they'll lift off. But here, I can't do that. So I had to make it somewhat different. I can't get the bolt in now. Come on now, don't play about. Alright, so that's going to go in there like that and onto there. It's one of these, as soon as you're watching, things don't work. I know it goes on here. There we go. Right, so that's going to go on there like that. Then there's washers and nuts, so let's just fasten it down for now. Just to hold it in place. Probably welding, all this welding on here is it's straight, but they were very close fit, those holes. Right, what's the next thing? The next thing is, this is 3/16. This gap is 1.5 inches. So these two plus a 3/16 make 1.5 inches, because I wanted to make this really rigid. I mean, what's the point of a head steady if it isn't rigid? And in order to do that, I didn't want to just make it out of plate, which would have to have bends in it and things. So the idea is that that is going to go on there like that. Then, hold on. Then we're going to have some 1/2 inch 41/30, which will go from there to there. That way, to take this off, all I've got to do is take the bolt out. Take this bolt out here, and because this is that'll just drop down out the way, and this will lift off without any problem. Alright, so I'll fasten these up. I'll bring the welder over, cut those and tack them on over here. Alright, then we'll give that a coat of silver paint. So there'll be two of these, of course, one on either side of that. We'll have the pipes and everything out of the way. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this. I want to fasten up all the wires, pipes, everything like that, while I wait for that plug for the chain case and a gasket for the gearbox. Right, well, I've got the bits painted, so that is going to go in there. I only painted them just so they don't rust, not for anything special. Then I've got the bolts the right size now. Come on now. goes through there like thus, and I want all this stuff to go on top of this, so that's going to go. I haven't got a washer on the other side. I just picked that washer up. What did I do with it? Never mind, the one thing we've got is hundreds of washers. That goes on there. This really has to go down parallel, as I say, the hole for once. I actually got the holes spot on. Okay, so that goes on like that. And as I say, this is why I had to make it like this, so that I could drop that on there and then bring the other piece up. Then this is going to come up, go there, that goes through. And when that's all tightened up, that should work. So let me fasten up those bolts, and then we'll see about routing the various. I actually took that off there because it was in the way when I was tack welding this. Then we'll see about getting all these cables and hoses fastened up permanently. So there's everything tucked up. All the leads go to the various plugs. They don't actually run next to each other. I've got things in between them like the oil hoses, so they're all in. Cables are on, wires are on. So all that's ready. Put the tank on top. Just got a delivery from Mastercar, which has the helicoil kit to do the other side of there, but I haven't got time to do that. So all we're going to do now is, hang on, we're going to put this on because of two things that happened when I phoned my supplier. Mentioned this before. Went into the parts book to get the number for this gasket, and it doesn't show a gasket for there. You remember I mentioned this before with the Triumphs? It doesn't show a gasket for there. So we'll put it on without the gasket because that's what it said. The other thing was I needed a points cover for here. You know, I have lots of ones off the singles and twins, but this one, as you know, has 3 bolts in it. 1, 2, 3. So I didn't have one that fitted. Now I looked on eBay, and I think the cheapest used one I saw was like $50. What's that? 38 quid, something like that. So while I was ordering things like the plug for the other side, I thought, let me just see how much a new one is. So I asked them, and he checked me, he said, oh, all we have are the billet aluminium ones. So I said, well, how much are they? $40. So you can buy a billet aluminium cap to go on there cheaper than a used pressed steel one. I didn't ask him how much they were, actually. I never thought, because I was that surprised when he said only $40. So I've got one of those coming. It's various screws. These are 2BA. These. I've ordered a couple of screws for here as well. They're actually 4BA. This, of course, has got some little screw, like a wood screw or something in it. So I'm hoping it hasn't damaged the thread. But anyway, I've got a couple of them coming. So let's put this on, because then we will have the kickstart. And the only reason I'm really showing you putting this on is because I want to show you something with the kickstart. Right, well, here we go. First of all, for those of you who have commented in the past that all it ever seems to do here is rain, it's raining again. In fact, I've rushed out in between torrential rain because you know how noisy it gets in here. Right, what I want to show you is, you may have heard me moan in the past, continuously, about Kickstarter Springs and trying to wind them on and get plates on. I love these. I think the BSA twins have these, the early ones. The kickstart mechanism with the spring and everything, with its little stop, it's all on here. So you can actually wind the spring up with the kickstart lever. There's the stop for it. So you wind it round. I'm moving out of picture here till you get it nicely tensioned, and then you just put the thing on. Make sure all the holes line up. Come on. Come on, screw holes, go in. That one's in, that one's in. There it goes. And that goes on, and look at that. As tight as you want it. Perfect. Alright, let me put these screws in, and then I'll bring you back. Right, well, so that's on there. And we're all set to go. I've ordered a new cotter pin for this. This is just an oldish one out of the BSA 250. And you'll find that although they're all sort of the same diameter, they seem to have a different angle for the flat. And they don't all interchange. So that's why this one doesn't seem to go in as much. Right, well, so as I say, I've ordered that. I've got all the bits coming to finish off. So next week we'll put the drain plug in the other side, we'll put the points cover on here. I've got the little felt things for to lubricate the points cam. I took them off because they were in the way when I was getting stuff done. So hang on. There you go. So they go onto little pincer things here, and you just crimp them up. What was I saying? Yeah, then we can put fuel lines on, we'll put the tank on, put some non-ethanol petrol in it, which I'll actually then drain out once we've got it running. And we should be able to start this. Oh, well, I'll put oil in, and then with the spark plugs out, I'll kick it up. You know my usual method. I'll kick it over until we get oil right through. Then we'll start it. And then that'll be done. And we can get back to our Triumph Otter. Alright, so that's it for the time being. Got a little lull in the storm, so I will grab my umbrella and shoot back up to the house. And until I see you next week, stay safe and enjoy yourselves.